ॐ तव कथामृतं तप्तजीवनं कविभिरीडितं कल्मषापहं शरवणमङ्गलं श्रीमदाततं भुवि वदन्ति भूरिदा जना. Your words are like nectar, bringing life to scorched souls. They are praised by poets and remove all sin. They are auspicious to hear, wonderful and exalted. Those who spread these words throughout the world are truly giving souls. Welcome to our class on the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. We are on chapter 25, Advice to Pandit Shashadhar, Monday, June 30th, 1884. And it's quite a long chapter. It started on page 473. Now we're at the bottom of page 478. This Pandit Shashadhar was a very good soul, and Sri Ramakrishna obviously is very fond of him. And one of the things we notice with Sri Ramakrishna is that he encourages people to follow the path that they're on, but if there's any what I call a corrective that needs to be made, he'll do that also. So if he sees a great Pandit who's a little bit dry, who's a little bit too much of reasoning, or not much of devotion, then he'll go in that direction. So the context is always important when we see the teachings that Thakur gives. This particular section is brilliant. It's really I can say that about everything, but just particularly the way Sri Ramakrishna explains, especially this whole idea of the state of the vijnani, and what does it mean to have that realization, and then to live in the world after realization, and who can do it, and who's qualified, and, because we get many different takes on it. That Thakur talks about it so many times about giving up the body in 21 days, and but there's so many subtleties to it that he goes through in quite a bit of detail here. So it starts out that Sri Ramakrishna speaking to Pandit Shashadhar, master to the Pandit. What is samadhi? Now, this samadhi is a very general term and a very specific term. In Raja Yoga, it has very specific meanings, especially with nirvikalpa and savikalpa samadhi. For Sri Ramakrishna, it can be the state of bhava, state of ecstasy, really a state where the mind goes to some other realm. And there are many different types, and he talks about, according to one's nature, if one is a jnani or a bhakta, the samadhi will be different. So he doesn't use the term in such a strict sense, and he'll mention so many different types that we don't know anything about these things. So he starts out, what is samadhi? It is the complete merging of the mind in God consciousness. So a very general statement. Nothing, is there any sense of I? Is there any vikalpa, any vrittis functioning? Nothing like that. Very general statement. The complete merging of the mind in God consciousness. Now, he'll talk about different types of samadhi. The jnani experiences jada samadhi, in which no trace of I is left. So this will really be a very deep type of merging of the individual self and the Supreme Self, so that there's no feeling of distinction. If there's no I, then there's no experiencer, just some experience. It's very hard to explain, or even to try to conceive of this state. But jada samadhi, jada because one becomes inert. And Thakur gives the illustration that one reaches such a state where a bird can land on your head, you won't even be aware of it. Snakes can crawl over your body, you will have no body consciousness, nothing like that. And of course, he was in this state for months on end when Totapuri came. So this is for the jnani. Now, sometimes Sri Ramakrishna will make a slight distinction and say this nirvikalpa samadhi is for the yogi. Now, how important this distinction is, I don't really know, but sometimes we get this impression that it's that yogic state of nirvikalpa samadhi that is difficult to bring the mind down from. And this state of that the jnani has, generally, we think of this state of the jnani as a state of fully awakened consciousness, not so much that there's no functioning of the mind at all. No vrittis, this is that yogic state. This other state is fully awakened and fully illumined type of mind. But here, he's almost talking about the jnani and the yogi in the same, with the same type of samadhi. The jnani experiences jada samadhi, in which no trace of I is left. The samadhi attained through the path of bhakti is called chetana samadhi. Now, where Thakur gets this terminology, I don't know. It could be the Vaishnava schools or other things, but they're not very clear. In this samadhi, there remains the consciousness of I. So if we want to make the very broad distinction, that the first is nirvikalpa samadhi, second savikalpa samadhi. But there's so much gray area, and as much as we like to have the very clear distinctions and categories and everything, sometimes we fool ourselves into thinking we've understood something if we can plug it into a certain category, pigeonhole something. But these are very mysterious things. So some sense of I, there remains the consciousness of I, the I of the servant and master relationship, of the lover and beloved relationship, of the enjoyer and food relationship. Now, this will be more of what Sri Ramakrishna calls bhava or bhava samadhi. How this difference this will also be a type of savikalpa samadhi. Savikalpa samadhi simply means there's something going on in the mind, but the mind is traveled to a different realm where there's no awareness of the body or any external thing. God is the master, the devotee is the servant. God is the beloved, the devotee is the lover. God is the food, and the devotee is the enjoyer. And then he quotes from the Ram Prasad song, I don't want to be sugar, I want to eat sugar. Pandit. What will happen if God dissolves all of the I, if he changes the enjoyer himself into sugar? Now, the nice thing about this Ram Prasad song is that it's a question of spiritual attitude, not a philosophical question. Is there a distinction between the Jivatman and Paramatman? The dualists, the acharyas and philosophers want to say that we can't become sugar. We can only enjoy sugar. With this idea is that we can, but we may not want to. So this is really Sri Ramakrishna's attitude that ultimately there'll be this merging and this oneness, and this distinction between the lover and the beloved can ultimately be transcended. And just like the form can melt back into the ocean when Sun of Knowledge comes up, but the devotee prefers this. And according to devotional schools, devotee prefers this in the state of liberation also. Some sense of distinction. The dualistic schools, they'll have all different types of mukti, where you have the same qualities of God, you live in the presence of God, the same dharma, all the different things like that. And one where you merge in God, and that's considered the lowest for them. So they like this type of relationship. So for Sri Ramakrishna, a lot of this is attitude and mood and different types of personalities. Now, we may say what happens in that final state when we give up the body is not a question of somebody's attitude. It either happens or it doesn't happen. But we don't know, even there, if there's some subjectivity, and that the experience of the God-realized soul who's a bhakta, even in that state of liberation, is it different than the jnani? Sometimes we get this impression that everything ends in oneness, so it'll be the same for everyone. But the bhaktas won't accept that. They'll say state of liberation. So who knows? We don't really know. Some of these things are a question of faith, and what appeals to us, what type of spiritual relationship, understanding, and everything appeals to us. So now this is the question that Pandit Shashadhar is asking. What will happen if God dissolves all of the I, if he changes the enjoyer himself into sugar? Now, this is that question. Really, another way of putting this question is, can one return from the state of nirvikalpa samadhi? So this is like saying that if that state is really equivalent to the salt dal becoming one with the ocean, is there any coming back from that state? Now, Sri Ramakrishna knows what his question is. He's being very roundabout about it. So Sri Ramakrishna says, Master smiling, come, tell me what is in your mind. So is this really your question? That you want to know if you attain the state of samadhi, what will happen? Will you give up the body in 21 days? Will you be lost? Will you come back? What will happen? So then Sri Ramakrishna says, but don't the scriptures mention Narada, Sanaka, Sanatana, Sananda, and Sunat Kumara? Now, this is all very mysterious. He's not giving a very straightforward answer. What does it mean? It means that here I'm giving you illustrations of those who had the highest experience and continue to live in the world. So this idea that no one can come back from that state of samadhi is something that Sri Ramakrishna did not accept. But there are so many nuances to this, who can come back and what state of mind. But we get the impression that it was generally held during Sri Ramakrishna's time that no one came back from that highest state. That once the ship went far enough into the black waters of the ocean, it can't come back. And Thakur, when he talks about the salt dal, he gives that impression somewhat. But then he says, in his case, he can go down as in that state. There's no experiencing, there's no one there who can tell what happened in that state, even after coming back up. So for Sri Ramakrishna, this salt dal has a slightly different meaning. It's not that when you get to the depths of the ocean, that means you get to the roof. You have that highest realization that there's no one who can come back. But coming back, it means coming back into this body-mind complex. And the time of that highest experience, there's no I there. There's no ego sense. There's to be able to explain what happens in that state even. That's why Sri Ramakrishna, even when he tried to, he couldn't explain what takes place in this nirvikalpa state. So anyhow, he's saying to him, no, don't worry. There are plenty of cases of those who have had the highest knowledge and live in the world. This is another way of saying that there is such a thing as jivan mukti. That it's not that you have this highest experience and then the body will have to fall eventually, but those come back and live in the world. Now, it's not so simple and it's not for everybody. And how is it done? He spends a lot of time with all of this. So, Pandit, yes, sir, they do. So the scriptures do talk about these God-realized souls, whether we want to say that these were all nitya siddhas or special souls, that's also true. This Sanaka, Sanatana, Sananda, and Sanat Kumara. The tradition is that in the beginning of creation, that these were the first four that were born in this world as humans somehow, and with such purity and such detachment and everything, that no desire to lead any type of worldly life. Now, who is there to marry? We don't know any of these things. That is all allegorical. so that they all led lives of the sannyas. And then how does creation continue? So then the Prajapatis were born, and it was part of that. But anyhow, the point is that, especially Narada, that these are special souls who have had the highest realization, who continue to live in the world. Yeah. Yeah. Now he's emphasizing the other side. He's not emphasizing so much that only very special souls, avatars and Ishvarakotis, can come back from that state. Now he's going to talk just in kind of general terms about those who even are born with karma, not special souls, that they'll be able to come back also. And sometimes he says they have to come back. They can't remain in that high state long. Karma will pull them down. So as I say, it's a very nuanced thing. But now he's not talking specifically. He's not saying that this Narada, Sanaka, these are rare cases, and that he's kind of giving this as an example of those who did come back from that highest experience. I think we'll see that when we go through this. Master, though they were jnanis, yet they kept the eye of the bhakta. Now, Thakur will say that some of them kept the eye of the jnani also. He'll talk about Shankaracharya and everything, but this is one way that those who have this highest realization, that they keep this relationship eye. They like to feel, says a lover of God, or all of the relationships that Thakur talked about before, that the eye of the servant, master, lover, beloved, enjoyer, and fool, all of these different relationships, they like to keep that type of relationship. Haven't you read the Bhagavata? The Bhagavata Purana will have many of these types of explanations. Pandit, I've read only part of it, not the whole. He was more of a traditional Vedantic scholar, Upanishads and the Gita and other things. Master, pray to God. He is full of compassion. Will he not listen to the words of his devotee? He is the Kalpa Taru. You will get whatever you desire from him. This Kalpa Taru is a mythological tree that anybody who goes and sits beneath it, whatever they desire, they'll get. So God is often thought of that way. We have our Kalpataru Day, when Sri Ramakrishna granted the boon, the desires of all his disciples who were there. Pandit, I haven't thought deeply about these things before, but now I understand. So he has some humility. He's a great Pandit. He lectured, in front of large audiences and everything. Master, God keeps a little of I in his devotee even after giving him the knowledge of Brahman. And now we get confused again. That even after the knowledge of Brahman, after going to the roof, that God will keep a little bit of this I. That I is the eye of the devotee, the eye of the jnani. So it can be either one. Through that eye, the devotee enjoys the infinite play of God. So now we may say that the little eye will be there, preventing that highest nirvikalpa samadhi. These are very hard to understand what Thakur means, but he's giving the impression that one can have what we normally call God realization, brahmajnana, and remain and live in the world with a relationship and an attitude and a sense of I, whether we're jnanis or bhaktas, it doesn't matter. Sometimes he ties it in with we still have some karma. There's prarabdha karma will pull the mind back down a little bit. It's not yet time to merge and disappear. Sometimes he'll give that type of explanation. Here, he's saying that God keeps a little of I in his devotee, even after giving him the knowledge of Brahman. Now, sometimes he'll say the devotee himself will cherish some desire to work for others, and that will also give a little sense of I. Who's giving the sense of I? This we can't say. Where Thakur's understanding, in his case at least, is that the Divine Mother, that she is the one that kept a little sense of I so he could live in the world and fulfill his mission, the reason why he was born. But the jnani may explain it differently. That's all. It's we don't know how, but as long as the mind comes down a little bit, the sense of I comes back. We know that much. Now, Thakur is going to quote some reference to Puranas, or I think. The pestle was almost worn out with rubbing, only a little was left, that fell in the underbrush and brought about the destruction of the lunar race, the race of the Yadus. The vijnani retains the eye of the devotee, the eye of the jnani, in order to taste the bliss of God and teach people. Yeah, this I was trying to find a reference to this Mushalam Yaduvangshanashanam. I read something once, I don't remember where and what the reference was, but anyhow, the idea is that pestle, you keep using it, and somehow the pestle becomes smaller and smaller and smaller, but it will never completely disappear. So someone was using it, and there was just a tiny bit left. So he threw it into the ocean, a river, something like that, and the fish ate it. And the fisherman caught it, and he sold his fish to a hunter. And the hunter, eating the fish, found this little piece of pestle and used it to make an arrow. And that was the arrow that was used that went into the foot of Krishna and killed him. Did you hear that story also? I don't know where it's from, but anyhow, the point is that this I, as much as Thakur says in another place that you reason 1,000 times, that this I doesn't exist, but it comes back. It's very hard to get rid of some remnant, a tiny little piece, and that'll be enough. Sometimes, because he refers to this Mushalam thing in one or two other places, sometimes he talks about these inherent tendencies, very strong tendencies. He always gives the example of Vijay Krishna Goswami, that no matter how much you scrape and everything, a little bit of bhakti will be there. That was such a strong tendency within him. So the idea with this, it says here, the story is told in Mahabharata of how the relatives of Krishna quarreled over the fragment of a pestle and exterminated themselves by fighting with one another. Anyhow, there are different versions of the story, but the point is that this sense of I, as long as we have some ordinary awareness, the sense of I is always there. It's always there. Shankaracharya had a sense of I. Sri Ramakrishna had a sense of I. It was when the mind would go into a higher state, it would merge and disappear. And they both understood that there was nothing absolute about it, but this is what ordinarily happens. That there'll be some feeling of at least dwelling within a body, and at least seeing through these eyes and hearing through these ears. That's enough. It's some sense that I'm the one who's talking. Now, deep down, I may know that God dwells within, the mother is doing everything for Sri Ramakrishna, but still, a little sense of I is there. When you would go into deep meditation, sometimes he would say that I completely disappears. Sometimes he say mother keeps a little trace of that I. But it's really just this said nobody can live in the world without some sense of I. What does I mean? It means what is our conception of ourselves? If we say Aham Brahmasmi, that's my sense of I am Brahman. That's also the ego of the jnani. So this is how Thakur says that the jnani who follows that path of knowledge, he'll have that. This Shankaracharya is always the example he gives. He gives that eye of knowledge. The rishis of old had timid natures. They were easily frightened. Do you know their attitude? It was this: let me somehow get my salvation. who cares for others. A hollow piece of driftwood somehow manages to float, but it sinks even if a bird sits on it. But Narada and sages of his kind are like a huge log that not only can float across to the other shore, but can carry many animals and other creatures as well. A steamship itself crosses the ocean and also carries people across. Now, Sri Ramakrishna, he'll talk about jnanis very often, and we have to distinguish. We have to look at the context. What is he talking about? Is he talking about someone who has attained knowledge or someone following the path of knowledge? So sometimes the jnani is the one who gets to the roof, and the vijnani is the one who comes back down again. Other times the jnani is the one following this path of knowledge. And they may be highly illumined jnanis that still haven't had that final experience, that are still on the path and everything, but they'll still be called jnanis. Thakur had nothing special against these rishis, but basically he's just giving that example of those who are a little afraid of attachment to the world. Now, Thakur warned everybody, his young disciples, don't get attached, keep yourself at a distance and everything, but at some point to be able to embrace everything also. So first negation, then affirmation, then acceptance. Teachers like Narada belong to the class of the vijnani. So now he's making that distinction. The vijnani. They were much more courageous than the other rishis. So the main thing with the vijnani is that he doesn't stop if he's following the path of knowledge. He doesn't stop with this idea that Brahman is not this, not this, not this, that he comes down and sees everything as a manifestation of Brahman, or he sees everything as Brahman. So and then it's fully embracing everything, embracing this world, embracing other living beings, no fear of attachment from them, because one only sees God in them. Everything changes, the vision changes that way. So teachers like Narada belong to the class of the vijnani. They were much more courageous than the other rishis. They are like expert satranja players. You must have noticed how he shouts as he throws the dice. What do I want? 6? No, 5. Here is 5. And every time he throws the dice, he gets the number he wants. He is such a clever player. And while playing, he even twirls his mustaches. A mere jnani trembles with fear. He is like an amateur satranja player. He is anxious to move his pieces somehow to the safety zone where they won't be overtaken by his opponent. But a vijnani isn't afraid of anything. He realizes both aspects of God, personal and impersonal. He has talked with God. He has enjoyed the bliss of God. You remember when Sri Ramakrishna asked, I think it was Hari, he said, who do you love? And he said, I don't love anybody. He said, what a dry fellow. Huh? So he wanted that balance, that don't put yourself in a situation where you can get attached. Don't let Maya overtake you. But at the same time, don't live a life of fear, always afraid that you can't mix with this and that, and you can't do this and that. That at some point that we have to start to embrace everything, to see everything, see God within all beings, and see everything as divine somehow. But a vijnani isn't afraid of anything. He has realized both aspects of God, personal and impersonal. He has talked with God. He has enjoyed the bliss of God. So this is that part of the vijnani that is really hard to understand. We can understand that this is the I consciousness comes back when the mind comes lower, and there's no attachment there, that I, there's no bondage or anything like that. But how one sees God and talks to God is in a highly personal way. This is something that we know only because Sri Ramakrishna lived that life. And not just him, Swamiji himself at various times. He said he felt as if Mother were holding him by the hand after his Amarnath experience and everything, and would feel guided and everything. Well, these are rare things. It is a joy to merge the mind in the indivisible Brahman through contemplation. You have the Bengali there. What does it say, contemplation? No, before that. When he says it a joy to merge them through contemplation. It doesn't say through contemplation. No. Okay, so this because I was wondering why it says through contemplation. Okay, so it's not in the original, huh? Okay. Yeah, normally the joy to merge the mind in the individual Brahman is not something with contemplation. It's something in meditation. I don't know why we have that. Yeah, there's nothing in there about that. Okay, so that explains. So it is a joy to merge the mind in the indivisible Brahman. We would have to say in meditation. I don't know why he says in contemplation here. And it is also a joy to keep the mind on the lila, the relative, without dissolving it in the absolute. So that means just keeping the mind just on a slightly lower plane. When it gets to a higher plane, then we're not aware of anything, not aware of this physical body. Even if the eyes are open, the mind is not connected with it. We won't see anything. That is a completely different realm. But some transformation takes place in that higher realm so that when we come down, we see the world differently. This is what Thakur calls his vijnana state. So for him, equally joyful. Why did he always want to keep the mind on the lower plane? He used to pray, Mother, don't let me merge the mind get merged in this Brahmajnana and everything. Let me enjoy this play. Let me enjoy bhakta and bhakti, he used to say. The company of devotees and the joy of love of God. This is only half of it. I think the other half was that because of equal joy in being merged in an infinite absolute, I think the other half was that, Mother, you sent me here for a reason, that if I'm always lost there, how can I talk to the devotees? What is the purpose of my birth and everything? So I think that was always part of the equation with him, without really calculating about it or anything. But because there was a period in his life, he says, before all the devotees came, after Totapuri left, where the tendency of the mind was to always remain in that nirvikalpa state. And the joy was so great and the pull was so great, it was very hard for him to keep his mind back down. Yeah, so it's not that this state of more of a dualistic state, or the lila state is more appealing than the nitya state. Each one has its own appeal. But Thakur said later that he preferred to keep the mind lower, and that somehow seeing the divine in all beings was a highest type of state. So we always have this question: which is higher, the state of jnana or vijnana? This at the attainment of nirvikalpa samadhi, or when the mind comes back down. Mind comes back down, it's a lower state from that point of view, but it's a more mature state. It's one that's greater, we can say, than that other state. And then one can go back and forth. At least these special souls could. The Bhavamuka, that Sri Ramakrishna could go like a boat going from one side to the other side, back and forth. So he says, it is a joy to merge the mind in the indivisible Brahman through contemplation. We can say through meditation. And it is also a joy to keep the mind on the lila, the relative, without dissolving it in the absolute. Yeah.
The previous line
Yeah.
starts with Take Chinta Kore.
Yeah. Now,
Akhanda
take
means
chinta kori. So this doesn't have to mean through meditation. It's while meditating, we can say the mind can merge.
Take Chinta Kore.
Yeah.
Akhanda mon loy holo ananda.
Yeah.
Or mon loy na holo lilate mon rekho.
So I would translate that more the while contemplating on God, or after contemplating, or through contemplating, when the mind merges. So it's not simply just, so through contemplation. So, okay, it's not so bad, but it really means that if we contemplate deeply on that individual, on the absolute Brahman, then the mind can merge because of that in deep contemplation. But it's more than contemplation. He's not just talking about some mental state. He's talking about really merging. Okay, that's helpful. A mere jnani is a monotonous person. He always analyzes, saying, "It is not this, not this. The world is like a dream, but I've raised both my hands. Therefore, I accept everything." Now, people get confused. We have one devotee in Connecticut. Every time we have a meeting, he'll raise his hand and he'll ask the same question. That all this talk about this non-dual Brahman and I am he, this and that and everything, and Thakur is always talking about having a relationship and devotion. Why do we emphasize it so much? We emphasize it so much because it's also the other half. We don't want to just talk about this bhakti. And as I said before, that this is what this Pandit Shashadhar needs to hear. This is filling in what seems to be lacking in him. Other times, Thakur will talk about that. And Swamiji also gave great emphasis to this non-dualism. So our challenge is not to see a contradiction or not to see any clash between the two. Thakur explains this by different attitudes, and not just different attitudes, but this neti as preliminary, as not the final truth. Uh, it's within the realm of sadhana, he says. This is as that spiritual practice, climbing from one step to the other step to the other step, is only helpful if we get to the roof. And we do it through this neti. One way of doing it. But he met many sadhus who came through and many pandits who, because they had such a strong view about this and this world is unreal and everything, that they became a little dry. And they didn't have that loving attitude and relationship and everything. This is what he's talking about. So we have to make sure if we like this I am he, the soham, and everything, that we have to still see that same divinity within me, is within everyone. So a mere jnani, and again, this is not the God realized soul. This is someone following the path of jnana yoga. A mere jnani is a monotonous person. He always analyzes, saying, "It is not this, not this. The world is like a dream, but I've raised both my hands. Therefore, I accept everything." This is his introduction to a story that he tells on different occasions. Listen to a story. Once a woman went to see her weaver friend. The weaver, who had been spinning different kinds of silk thread, was very happy to see her friend and said to her, "Friend, I can't tell you how happy I am to see you. Let me get you some refreshments." She left the room. The woman looked at the threads of different colors and was tempted. She hid a bundle of thread under one arm. The weaver returned presently with the refreshments and began to feed her guest with great enthusiasm. But looking at the thread, she realized that her friend had taken a bundle. Hitting upon a plan to get it back, she said, "Friend, it is so long since I have seen you. This is a day of great joy for me. I feel very much like asking you to dance with me." The friend said, "Sister, I'm feeling very happy too." So the two friends began to dance together. When the weaver saw that her friend danced without raising her hands, she said, "Friend, let us dance with both hands raised. This is a day of great joy." But the guest pressed one arm to her side and danced, raising only the other. The weaver said, "How is this, friend? Why should you dance with only one hand raised? Dance with me raising both hands. Look at me. See how I dance with both hands raised." But the guest still pressed one arm to her side. She danced with the other hand raised and said with a smile, "This is all I know of dancing." Yeah. So this means that we have some type of feeling that we can't let go, that we have to be a little self-protective. A little ego is there, that what will people say, what will people think, and everything. That if we really want to lead a beautiful, perfect type of spiritual life, we have to get rid of all of this type, even shyness and things. How Thakur used to hammer at M for being so shy and for not singing and dancing with the others and everything. That we have to be free. We have to not care so much what will people think, what will people say. Many of the people who came to Sri Ramakrishna were very important people. Dr. Sharkar, especially, but even those who were close devotees, and felt very shy to do all of this singing and dancing and everything. And at that time, this was reserved really for just these real people who did this kirtan and everything. Others, many were Brahmos. They didn't do that type of stuff. So at least until Thakur introduced it. So this is a way of saying that we can't hold it back in spiritual life, and we can't worry what will people think and what will they say, and they'll talk about us and everything. That or that what will happen if I get reach that stage where I can't fulfill my duties? Will I lose my job? This and that. That we have to abandon all of these things if we want to have this highest realization. Otherwise, we have to be responsible people. But if it's because of pride and ego and everything, we have to give all of that up. And Thakur is also saying that this is a little bit of the one-sided attitude of the jnani. So he says, the master continued, "I don't press my arm to my side. Both my hands are free. I am not afraid of anything. I accept both the nitya and the lila, both the absolute and the relative." These jnanis have a great fear of being taken to be bhaktas. That, well, what will they say, singing and dancing in the name of God? How bad it'll look and everything. Yeah, especially the Brahmos. Is not allowed to go into a temple and bow down before the image and everything. I said to Keshav Sen that he would not be able to realize God without renouncing the ego. He said, "Sir, in that case, I should not be able to keep my organization together." Thereupon I said to him, "I'm asking you to give up the unripe ego, the wicked ego, but there's no harm in the ripe ego, the child ego, the servant ego, the ego of knowledge." So again, we have to understand that this ego is not some unchanging element within the structure of the mind. This the Sankhya idea of ahankara. That doesn't have to be taken to mean this personal type of ego. Some sense of I that belongs to the mind. Everybody has some sense of I. But this type of ego that Thakur is talking about has all of these elements to it of fear and pride and anger and lust and greed and pride. All of the different things go into this nature of the I. It can be rajasic, tamasic, sattvic, be all different types of things. So it's not a question of getting rid of this I. It's a question of what is the nature of this I. So this idea of this ripe I and the unripe I, this unripe ego, this is something that we all have to a certain extent, just like a fruit. It won't be 100% green, it won't be 100% ripe. Most of it will be in the process of ripening. So it'll be a little hard in some places, and after some time, it'll start to get riper. So it's this sense of I is in a constant state of change. If we do spiritual practice, it should be changing the way we want it to change. Otherwise, this sense of I changes for various reasons. So Thakur talks about the ego of old age. Just getting older, if we're not doing anything to really practice introspection, if we don't pay too much attention and just this ego of old age comes, it means that don't throw me aside. You better show me respect, that I'm still somebody. I'm still have some value. Don't think of me just as an old person. I can't do this. I can't do that. The ego of old age. Now we see those who practice the sadhana throughout their lifetime, how this old age is such a blessing for them. We see some of these very, very senior sadhus in their old age, how just such detachment. And then there are others, pride will come because of their old age. So nothing is automatic, but through living a long life, everything we see, everything comes and goes. All the attachments that we had when we were young, everything is gone. And we just observe, watch this play of Maya. We see, really, it's a very beautiful thing when we see some of the very senior sadhus at the end of that's why there's some advantage to leading a long life, even with all the suffering and everything. That we get that attachment just burned out of us. That really get that feeling it's a passing show. And we can reach that point where we say, yes, my play is done, ready to go and everything. So this is one example of how this unripe ego can remain. It can remain if we don't do any serious spiritual practice, or at least introspection. And what Thakur wants us to do is to make a very conscious effort to adopt or to superimpose on us this relationship ego. Arop kara. He uses. I've never come up with a very good translation for that. Is arop kara, that somehow we adopt that spiritual attitude, and somehow we superimpose it so that it smothers out the other one. This ego that's so attached to the body and everything. So this ripe ego is used both as a spiritual practice and a spiritual attitude for us, and the same term is used for the ego of the vijnani, that coming down, living in the world with that sense of I. Then it's different. It's the feeling of I that we have on the path going upward is something we have to keep reminding ourselves, and we have to keep working on cultivating. We have to keep cultivating this feeling, I'm a child of God, a servant of God. Keep reminding ourselves and everything. Afterwards, it becomes perfectly natural and no bondage to it at all. That's the real ripe ego. So there's the ripe ego of the sadhana, which is our aid, which is our help, and this ripe ego of the vijnani. So Thakur uses this in both senses. So he's telling him, there's no Keshav, I'm asking you to give up the unripe ego, the wicked ego. That means the ego full of pride, full of attachment, full of all of the passions. That's the one, and so connected with his body and with our personal history, with whatever our cultural, our ethnic group, our religious group, whatever it is, all the things that we identify with that separate us from other people and limit us and restrict us. This is I, he says, asking you to give up the unripe ego, the wicked ego. The wicked ego, why is it a wicked ego? Because we get angry, we'll lash out at somebody. We get jealous, we'll say unkind things. We have some attachment to something, we'll fight somebody over it. It can really, and it'll make us miserable. This is the main point. It'll make us miserable. There's people who have tremendous pride. There's a tremendous bondage to that. But there's no harm in the ripe ego. The child ego, that means the relationship of looking upon God as mother, the servant ego, dasya bhav, and the ego of knowledge. So this ego of knowledge is that I am one with the Supreme. That's also a type of ego. The worldly man's ego, the ignorant ego, the unripe ego, is like a thick stick. It divides, as it were, the water of the ocean of Satchidananda. But the servant ego, the child ego, the ego of knowledge, is like a line on the water. One clearly sees that there is only one expanse of water. The dividing line makes it appear that the water has two parts, but one clearly sees that in reality there is only one expanse of water. This is how Sri Ramakrishna reconciles the Jnana Yoga and Bhakti Yoga. This is all based on Jnana Yoga. There's really only oneness. This sense of I is what gives this feeling of separation, but utilize it. This is what he's saying, that we can utilize this sense of I to form a relationship. Otherwise, how do we constantly think of God? He says, think of God all the time. We do it through a relationship. The way a child thinks of its mother all of the time, we have to do it that way. Or if we're really great jnanis, then constantly be thinking of the witness consciousness is difficult. But there's also he talks about the ego of knowledge. He's not shortchanging anyone who's following that path. Here, Shankaracharya kept the ego of knowledge in order to teach people. So this will be the vijnani. This will after that highest realization.
Yeah. That kind of ego, right ego.
This is ripe ego. So for Sri Ramakrishna, basically two types of ripe ego. One is of the jnani, and for the bhakta, the ripe ego takes many different forms, but it's always a relationship. So sometimes he says it'll be looking upon God as the master, sometimes looking upon God as mother, or having some type of relationship, but it'll be a devotional type of relationship. But the other is also the ripe ego. He says the ego of the eye of the jnani. He says. So Shankaracharya kept the ego of knowledge in order to teach people. God keeps in many people the ego of a jnani. Now look at this. He's not saying that this is again reserved for special people. He's not saying Ishvara Koti here or the avatar. He's saying God keeps in many people the ego of a jnani or the ego of a bhakta, even after they've attained Brahma Jnana. Oh, confusing. Yeah, but it's very hopeful for us that we can have that highest experience and continue to live in the world and experience all the joy of God realization. But it's very interesting that he doesn't always speak so clearly about the possibility of coming back from that highest state. He's not emphasizing this, you'll melt in the ocean, you'll dissolve doll, there's no coming back. Really, it's very interesting how here he's emphasizing the other side, that God keeps in many people the ego of a jnani or the ego of a bhakta, even after they have attained Brahma Jnana. Hanuman, after realizing God in both his personal and his impersonal aspect, cherished toward God the attitude of a servant, a devotee. He said to Rama, "O Rama, sometimes I think that you are the whole and I am a part of you. Sometimes I think that you are the master and I am your servant. And sometimes, Rama, when I contemplate the absolute, I see that I am you and you are I." And this is the, we can say, probably favorite example that Sri Ramakrishna gives. He mentions it many, many times about how these different relationships, these different schools of Vedanta, or different spiritual attitudes to take, not conflicting philosophical systems. They can be, if we want to do it that way, they can be, But what he's saying is that it simply depends on what is our state of mind at the time. If we feel identification with the body, then we take the servant attitude or any relationship. If we feel a part of God, then this is Jiva, Jivatman, Paramatman. If we feel the oneness, then I am He. This is the Atman Brahman idea. So just one person can have all of these different attitudes at different times, or one may have one all of the time. One may not like to abandon this servant, master-servant relationship. Everyone is different. Hanuman is given as the perfect illustration of somebody who can have all these attitudes, these three different ones, which correspond to dualism, qualified non-dualism, and non-dualism. Yashoda became grief-stricken at being separated from Krishna and called on Radha. Radha saw Yashoda's suffering and revealed herself to her as the divine Shakti, which was her real nature. Yeah, we have a highly philosophical interpretation that we find in Bhagavata also. That Radha and the gopis, that they represent this Shiva Shakti relationship. And symbolically, that these are the divine powers or gunas of the Brahman. We have that type of understanding, and that Radha, deep down, she knows that she's that Shakti. So Radha saw Yashoda's suffering and revealed herself to her as the divine Shakti, which was her real nature. She said to Yashoda, Krishna is Chidatma, absolute consciousness, and I am Chit Shakti, the primal power. Ask a boon of me. Yashoda said, I don't want Brahmajnana. Please grant me only this, that I may see the form of my Gopala in my meditation, that I may always have the company of Krishna's devotees, that I may always serve the devotees of God, that I may always chant God's name and glories. So it's a question of individual personality and spiritual attitude, not a question of higher or lower or anything like that. This is a Uruchi Veda. Thakur says that distinction based on taste, what appeals to us. Once the gopis felt a great desire to see the forms of the Lord. So Krishna asked them to dive into the water of the Jamuna. No sooner did they dive into the water than they all arrived at Vaikuntha. There they saw the form of the Lord endowed with his 6 celestial splendors, but they did not like it. They said to Krishna, we want to see Gopala and serve him. Please grant us that boon alone. We don't want anything else. So Janaki Nata, Shri Nata, they're the same. But I only want to see my lotus-eyed Rama. I don't care for the other 4. Before his departure for Mathura, Krishna wanted to give the knowledge of Brahman to the gopis. He said to them, I dwell both inside and outside all beings. Why should you see only one form of mine? The gopis cried in chorus, Oh Krishna, do you want to go away from us? Is that why you are instructing us in Brahmajnana? Do you know the attitude of the gopis? It is this, we are Radha's and Radha is ours. There's a footnote. The ideal of the gopis was not to merge themselves in God consciousness, but to keep their individuality in order to enjoy the communion of Radha and Krishna. They regarded themselves as the companions of Radha. Okay, then we get a little something about this. The eye of the devotee never disappears. We'll start with that next time. Oh, next Friday, I'm not here. Yeah. So we won't have class next Friday, the following Friday. So we'll stop here. This is on page 481. Om Niranjanam Nityamanantarupam Bhaktanukam Bhatudha Vikraham Ishavataram Parameshamedhyam Tam Ramakrishnam Shirasa Namama. We bow our heads before Sri Ramakrishna, who is stainless, of infinite nature, whose heart melts in sympathy for his devotees, who is an embodiment of the divine and the Supreme Lord, and ever worthy of our worship. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto you.